Welcome back to Morning Express. Time to talk about your money. It's 2021 and many of you are making new year resolutions and setting up goals. Many of those are financial, and 2020 has not been kind to many, and therefore there is need for some advice on how to weather difficult times and how to plan for your year in the right way. Now, joining me for this very important discussion is Waithaka Gatumia, joining us via Zoom. He's the CEO of Centonomy, as well as Ken Gichinga, who's the Chief Economist at Mentoria Economics. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. So when we talk about planning for the year, it seems like a daunting task to some, and for some it seems like something and do, given that they might be having problems with finances and therefore they just would love to go one day or 1 month at a time. I'll start with you, Waithaka. What should we keep in mind as we go into 2021, particularly when it comes to personal finance?
I think first and foremost, it's important for the Saudis to have put something concrete on the table to show
that telling people that you need to have money. We already know that. It's never telling people that you need to save. We already know that. It's never telling people that you need to invest. We already know that. The issue is being intentional. That's why I really love conversations like this and when you call us to come and speak, because what it does, it causes us to be intentional about our personal finance. We tend to be very passive in our planning. We tend to be very how would I say, we go with the flow. So we make a plan when we have money rather than make a plan for the money when it comes. So right now, even if you had not made a plan for January, even if you had not made a plan for the year that is ahead, now you have an opportunity. And the opportunity is for you to sit down right now, take some time out and plan. I'm telling you, there is such power in simply planning. Even if you don't have a template, you don't have someone who has taught you before, simply thinking through the process. I earn this amount of money. These are the things that I'd like to do. How can I get from where I am to where I want to be? So when it comes to personal finance, being intentional is really powerful, especially for everyone who is employed. If you are employed, we get very comfortable with that paycheck. It's a good time for you to begin to set up, and the same goes for those in business as well. So be intentional. That means you make a plan for your money.
Now, burying our heads in the sand is not the answer. And Ken, come in on this conversation. The times have not been kind, particularly for those in business. And you have a view even of the economics of the country. So how would you advise anyone, whether in business, whether they're earning salaries, in view of the job cuts and the pay cuts that a lot of people in the workforce have experienced? How should they plan for an upcoming 2021?
Many thanks, Trixie, and good morning and Happy New Year. Indeed, 2021 has arrived, and a lot of people have a sense of hope that this year could possibly be better than last year. And indeed, many people are following what Waithaka is telling us about being intentional and making plans. I've studied economics and psychology, and I've come to realize that the mind has a difficult time in processing very big things. So you might have, it's easy for the mind to say, yes, this year I want to build a house. But what the mind really likes is to break that goal into small weekly steps. Small weekly steps that are doable and achievable. I think the challenge is sometimes the goals we have are quite grand, but we don't break them down into ways that the mind can process on a daily or on a weekly thing. So I think what I advise people is, yes, the economy is changing. Yes, sometimes the plans might change, but we need to have what I call a weekly playbook. Where we look at, this week, what are the few things that I can do this week to get a bit closer? Just in the same way that, the work of when you're eating, you have to digest what you're eating into smaller chunks for it to be absorbed into the body. So I think it's that weekly steps that I think a lot of people tend to miss, and eventually they become overwhelmed by the grandeur of their plan.
Now, that's very important, particularly when you are also earning that money in those small bits. Now, I'd like Mr. Gatumia to come in on how to plan but not overwhelm yourself, because a lot of people fail in their goals, financial or otherwise, because they do make those big plans that that Ken has been talking about, but then it just overwhelms them, and then basically they just lose track of how to. So how do you plan for the big thing and then break it down, as he has said, if you at all agree with that format?
Oh, I agree 100%. So thank you so much, Trixie. And even Ken, that was brilliant in how you broke it down. And in fact, that's what we do at Centonomy. So we've realized that in school, we are taught almost like what Ken taught, the big picture type things. These are the kind of things that you need in life. These are what you want to achieve. But we're never actually taught the steps to get there. When I talked about intentionality, that's what I'm saying, those actual daily steps to achieve your goal. One of the first things that you must do is know what that goal is. So the fact that Ken said, I want to build a house, that's not enough. That's not a goal. What kind of house? Where is that house? How much does that house cost? When? By when do you want to achieve that goal? Because as Ken has said, when it is a big goal like that, you need to know when, where it is, so that you work backwards to where you are today and say, how do I get from where I am to the kind of lifestyle that I want? And that's the skill set that we begin to teach about at Centonomy. And this is the thing, having that goal set means that you can break it down, as Ken has said, into daily, weekly, monthly goals. Many of us think monthly because of the way that our income comes. And so setting the goal becomes extremely important. Saying I want to have a house is not enough because we don't know where that house is, how much it costs, and by when. When you have that overall goal in place, then you can work backwards and begin to say, this is what I want. Telling me that you want to send your children to a good university, not enough. You need to say which university, because then you're able to say, it'll cost me this amount in the next how many years, 5, 10 years, depending on how old your children are. So setting goals becomes an extremely important part of that process. And that's what we help with when it comes to that planning at Centonomy.
Okay, now Ken, when you do that, you also have to keep in mind of some of the realities we have faced. 2020 taught us a lot about certain realities that could actually shake you off track and get you, in trouble in terms of finances if you hadn't planned accordingly. So let's talk about planning with caution and being aware of what's happening with the economy. We do know that some of the tax breaks that we were all getting in 2020 will not be there in 2021. So explain to us some of the things we need to be looking out for as we do our planning. What do we need to be to do? What do we need to read to keep ourselves informed of some of the shifts that might affect our finances, so that we're not shocked when what we were planning to save or what we were planning to buy or invest in is not in, or the money we had planned for is not enough because something came in that we could not control.
Very well said, Trixie. I think one of the biggest problems people tend to have is they disconnect their personal finance from what's happening in the state of the economy.
Right.
So they have this bubble where they say, I want to have the best possible returns, but they have no clue where the economy is going. They have no clue which sectors are growing, which sectors are in reverse. So you find somebody has very grand plans. They say, I want to be in this sector, but in the macro scheme of things, this sector is actually dying off and might not even be there in the next 3 years. So I think that lack of unified thinking about money is one of the biggest challenges that I see, where people cannot connect what's happening in their personal lives, what's happening in their businesses, and what's happening in the economy, not just in Kenya, but around the world. So what we need to have is a unified thinking of money. And that's what I really try to encourage people to pursue. And the only way you can achieve this is keeping track of the news, really keeping track on a daily track, really being able to, number one, keep track of, and we have great publications. You have your Business Daily that captures a lot of things that are happening in the economy. You have your Standard, you have your Nation. For me, I keep saying constantly reading these things. Now, it's sometimes very difficult for the modern executive to try and keep in touch with all these things that are happening on a day-to-day, because there's so much happening. So what we try to do at Mentoria is we try to summarize all the key points. Every Monday evening, we try to really summarize what are the key talking points that happened last week.
What you need to know.
And yeah, exactly. And what to prepare for this coming week, not next week, for this coming week. And I think that perspective often serves to be quite useful to people.
As we chase our goals, financial ones, Mr. Gatumia, there are certain things that actually aid in ensuring you get them. One of them is pooling resources, coming together as communities and finding a way of achieving our goals, especially in times when going at it alone might be very difficult. Is there a place for those chamas and all these communities in today's economy, and how can we take advantage of that approach?
Trixie, there is always space for chamas, and this is a powerful tool that we have for investment. The difference when it comes to chamas is always ask yourself this question. When we're training investment groups, we actually try to move away from the term chamas, not because we think that it's a bad term, no, but it's because chamas often cover a vast, broad spectrum of groups. You know, family groups, high school groups. I mean, so when you say chama, it's difficult to know. So we say investment groups. The power of investment groups is that they assist you to do things that you probably could not do by yourself. And that's a good way to measure whether your investment group, your chama, is actually working for you, if it is assisting you to do something that you couldn't do for yourself. A good example is real estate tends to be capital intensive. What does that mean? It requires a lot of money up front. And so chamas are very powerful. Investment groups are really powerful in getting into industries like real estate, because when you pool your resources, you can actually do a lot more. I have to say this just to add on to what Ken had said earlier, is that learning is important. You can please do not get into investments, even with a chama, without understanding that investment. Get as much information as you can. Subscribe to Ken's blog. Pick up books. There are amazing books on wealth creation that are out there. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Richest Man in Babylon. You can pick up a book by our former CEO, our founder, our second Duarte, called Making Sense. Get into classes like Centonomy where you can learn so that when you're applying this knowledge, you're able to grow. What Ken said is get as much information as you can so that you can make that investment, and do that with your investment groups, your chamas as well.
Okay. Now, what are some of the other tips and tricks you can use to ensure that you are getting far from pooling resources? What else can people put in play to ensure they plan sufficiently and wisely for their finances in 2021?
Oh, great. So there are three main things that I want everybody to write down. Number one is to pay yourself first. As a principle, speak about it. Pay yourself first. What does that mean? Not, you know, the way people go to pay themselves on a Friday night. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about saving and investing first. Make that a habit. I'm telling you, even if it is 5 shillings, 10 shillings per day, depending on your income. Some it's 5 or 10 shillings. Other people, it's 10,000 shillings. Depending on what your income level is, the habit of saving and investing is what is more important, because consistency over time will get you the results that you need. Number two, track your expenses. Many of us think we do our budgeting because we do our budgeting. We know I earn 20,000 shillings, therefore I'm going to spend this amount, I'm going to spend this amount, this amount. When you come into our class, you'll find that people often don't even know where that money goes, especially the small amounts. We know the big ones like rent, we know the big ones like school fees, those ones we know. But the other small amounts, you will be shocked where your money goes and how much you spend. So tracking your expenses actually helps you to budget more than having the total amount and then just spending it. That's principle number two. And principle number three, focus on assets. Many of us always purchase things that we think are assets, but they're not. Your sofa set, it's a good thing to have, but it never puts money in your pocket. That sofa set is the same as same cost as a motorbike. If you bought a motorbike instead of a sofa set, I know you'll wonder where you're going to sit. Imagine you find somewhere to sit. But that motorbike will be earning you some income when it is on the road rather than the sofa set that's in your room. Now, can you do both? If you plan and you work on it, you can get there. But the idea is the mindset of growth, which means that you're looking for assets. So those three, once again, number one, pay yourself first, which means save and invest first. Make it a habit. Number two, track your spending. Just know exactly where your money is going. Every cent, every shilling, it makes a difference. And number three, focus on assets. One last thing, Trixie, I want everybody to become ambitious, because ambition is going to cause you to know, I want better. So it'll force your mind to think, what can I do now to achieve more with the life that I have?
And speaking of ambition, in 2021, a lot of people were very pessimistic about going into business, entrepreneurial ventures, but there are a few crazy ones who decided this is the time to start. And for many of them, that paid off. Speak to us about taking risks of that sort and how this could actually pay off for people in 2021.
Indeed, we live in a world of uncertainty, and anytime you take a venture, you take a risk. And in finance, we normally see the higher the risk, the higher the returns. But it has to be calculated risk that is anchored on good research, is anchored on the kind of advice Moidaka has just given us, really on being able to track your expenses, being able to really organize yourself well. I think there's that last part on assets, focusing on the assets.
Yes.
Maybe that's a part maybe I'd differ from Moidaka. I would say focus on cash flow. Cash flow is far more superior to assets. In fact, the challenge we have right now is sometimes people have invested like in pieces of land on the outskirts.
Perhaps for the viewers watching at home, what would the difference be between cash flow and an asset? Because some would imagine an asset would contribute into your cash flow in one way or the other.
Indeed, and that's a very powerful question. Indeed, you have two types of assets. You have assets that, for example, like real estate. If you buy a piece of land, its real value will come in its appreciation. So in about 3 or 4 years, it will appreciate in value, and you'll be able to book a profit and when somebody buys that piece of land from you. Then you have assets that generate cash flow. Now think of an apartment, for example, and you put it in the rental market. So you're getting money every month. So those are two different types of investments in real estate, but very different outcomes. What I try to really remind people is, yes, assets are important, but cash flow is far more superior. What we have right now is people who are stuck with pieces of land. They're trying to sell it off. The market is not where it used to be, and they're really struggling, trying to raise that liquidity. So I'd really try to focus more on things that generate cash flow as you build your asset base.
Okay. Mr. Gatumi, care to reply?
Oh, yeah, I'm in complete agreement. You see, when we have 2 minutes to respond to questions here on air, it's hard to get into the depth of it. But I'm in agreement with Ken. The idea is that you want to focus on assets that will give you an income over time. But that's a long-term strategy, especially as individuals. Why? Because you're thinking about the greatest question for all those who are planning to retire one day. The greatest issue you have to deal with in retirement is income. And so when we're teaching in the Centonomy class, we are planning for that day when you're going to retire so that your assets by that time are income generating assets, because then there's cash flow in that. What Ken was speaking about, I'm in complete agreement. At that point is when the cash flow becomes very important from your assets. So you can put together a strategy until that point. But in business, that is different. In business, again, not from the end, but from the beginning, cash is king. You're looking for how does the business generate a cash flow on a regular basis. So we're not in disagreement. We're in agreement. I just gave an answer with the time that I had at that moment.
Okay, and also on taking entrepreneurial risks, how should people approach it? I know right now people selling dawa with the COVID-19 are making a killing. The people who are focusing on self-care also making a killing. Talk to us about figuring out what could work in terms of making money, given even in a tricky situation.
Let me tell you this. Entrepreneurs need to get the right information before they start a business. When Ken says, and I am in agreement with him, and that's what we teach in our entrepreneurship class, we talk about how do you, the entrepreneur, make money from your business. That is very different from how does your business make money. Because if you understand that relationship between my money and the business money, then our expectations become much more real. Let me give you a quick example of it. Many people get into business and then they look at the competition. They'll see a business that has been out there for a long period of time, and they'll say, let's say they're selling sportswear. And they'll say, look, how is it that this sports shop is selling this shoe at 2,000 shillings? I can get it from China for 1,000 shillings. And they think that, you know what I'll just simply be importing the one at 1,000 and sell. Yes, you'd be able to do that, but what you have not understood is what Ken mentioned, the cash flow within the business. You may be able to sell that shoe for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but it will never actually pay for yourself. It will never put money in your pocket. You make a profit on the sale of the shoes, but it will not actually be money in your pocket. That business is selling it at the right price for this economy, for where we are, in order for the whole business to make a profit, including the owner and the entrepreneur. So understanding how cash works in a business is so important. Get the training that you need. Campus Autonomy will help you.
Okay, as you flag that, could you also tell us, I mean, when it comes to agility, because some of these ideas, things change and opportunities come up just because of those sudden changes. So tell us about being agile and quick to act.
So when we're training entrepreneurs, we talk about a very interesting concept. It is flexible rigidity or rigid flexibility. What does that mean? In any business, you need to have a plan. You need to have a strategy of where you are and where you want to go. However, things change. And as you adjust, you make it part of your plan. And once you have adjusted, now you become rigid to that new plan. Last year was a great example for us. We were training for over 11 years now. We've been training, but for 10 years we had been training in person. So people would come into a hall and we train them there. Now in March last year, the president comes on air and says, all classes are shut down. In 2 days, we had to move our classes from the physical training to an online platform like what we're using right now. If we had not done that, the business would have completely collapsed. By the grace of God, we were able to do that. Our customers came with that. We convinced them in that same way. And that's the agility that you're talking about. I saw businesses that were making clothes, and they quickly changed their systems, their machinery, to begin to make face masks and to make PPE. Now Kenya has become an exporter of PPE. If we are not agile, businesses can very easily collapse.
That's so true. Now, Mr. Gichinga, to ensure you do this, you have to keep up with information that you are in the industry of churning out information, particularly when it comes to the economy. So talk to us about that and how this can aid in that sort of agility that is needed to, make money in difficult or tricky times.
Indeed, agility is one of the most important aspects of an entrepreneur. Your ability to read the market, to read market trends, and to adjust the products that you're supplying to the market, because the market knows what it needs and at what price it wants it at. Now, if you really think about where the place of news and information comes in, it's really to see where is policy going in the country. What are the areas that seem to be growing? I remember once reading about a man who imported all these plastic bags, I think it was in 2017, spent over 150 million shillings, only for 3 months later for the government to put a ban on plastic bags. And you can imagine the tremendous loss that man would have faced. So often, far too often, you see people going into business from a personal conviction, but there is no market conviction. They have not done any proof of concept. They have not really tested. They have not done a pilot. They have not done any market survey. And unfortunately, all those efforts come to naught.
Okay, thank you very much. Doing your due diligence is something that is cutting across from both you gentlemen. Now, I'd like a short closing remark from you, Mr. Gatumia.
Let us be intentional about our finances. Don't just let life happen to you. Plan for that life. And number two, have the ambition for the goals that you want to achieve. If we don't have the ambition, there's nothing else driving us to do something better. And I think each one of us has a dream. Go for your dream, but go for your dream with your eyes open. We'd love to help you with that here at Centonomy. Check us out at centonomy.com.
Okay, Mr. Gichinga?
I'd say small is beautiful. Take time to really distill those big grand plans into small things that can be accomplished today and this week. I'd also say be open to new concepts, be open to learning, and be able to develop organically, because what we know today might not be what we know tomorrow. So the ability to adapt and to adjust to that new reality is extremely important.
Okay, thank you. Ken Gichinga is the chief economist at Mentoria Economics, and Waithaka Gatumia is the CEO at Centonomy. Thank you so much for bringing context to this and informing our viewers on how they can plan sufficiently for the upcoming year in terms of their finances and perhaps if they're willing or trying to get into business. We take a short break on the